should start, as Janine already
I'll
did.
give it a try, and hopefully there won't be feedback. Yeah. Okay. Well, okay, I'll start from the beginning here because this is where we'll start the tape. Yeah. Welcome to our second Google Hangout session of Leaders in Energy Without Borders. I am Janine Fennell, and I direct Leaders in Energy. We are a professional, educational, networking, and advisory services organization. Our mission is to build a community of leaders to enable solutions to move us towards a more sustainable energy system, economy, and world. It is a pleasure to be with you here on this extra day, Leap Day, that only happens once every 4 years. We need all the time we can get to transition to a clean energy system, so it's fitting today that we have convened our forum to look at scenarios for achieving a 100% renewable energy system. And just an FYI here, I use the term global architecture, and kind of trade off between that and system. That refers more broadly to hardwired items such as the legal, financial, hardwire and softer legal, financial, environmental issues related to deciding and organizing the energy on location. So welcome, and our session format will be as follows. I'm going to take about 15 minutes, and I'm going to provide an overview of Leaders in Energy with an introduction of 7 analyses that range from a variety of sources, including projections, pathways, and scenarios on how we can more quickly transition our society to make the needed progress identified by the Paris Agreement and others to move us on a track for reduced greenhouse gases and ultimately zero emissions. My colleague, Sylvia Leahu-Aluas, who is the Leaders in Energy Sustainable Manufacturing Director, she will then discuss her research on this topic, and then we'll be joined by Adrian Kamp, who is the founder of Energy for One World and a partner with us on Leaders in Energy from Leaders in Energy Without Borders. And it's kind of exciting. I'm broadcasting here located in Washington, D.C., and Sylvia is in Indianapolis, Indiana, and Adrian is in Oslo, Norway. So just the beauty of, as we have these conversations, just being able to chat with one another all around the world, just how phenomenal technology is, and what a delight. And, you know, I'll also be going through some slides on leaders, and just really nice, too, how we've been able to connect in this group. So let's move to the next slide in terms of the format. Sylvia, are you able to move to the next slide?
Yeah, I'm at the beginning.
But basically the slide that I was going to show you shows a picture of Jared Diamond's book Collapse, How Societies Choose to Succeed or Fail, and just highlights a lot of the issues and challenges that we're concerned about in terms of our planet. And then move on the next slide to clean energy and sustainable development, and really more the positive, innovative side that we are focusing on to help create more jobs and livelihoods in a way that regenerates and sustains the planet rather than destroying it. The next slide after that is really connecting thought leaders, which is what we're doing here in Leaders in Energy, working to transform ideas from thought leaders all around the world, bringing them together to create synergies for action and change. The slide after that is really our key building blocks in terms of mission of Leaders in Energy mission, and how we're working to attract and cultivate talent from all generations to make a contribution towards developing energy and sustainability solutions, where we really emphasize utilizing systems thinking, interdisciplinary collaboration as we help people connect on green jobs and business opportunities. The slide after that just has a couple of bullets talking about our Leaders in Energy blog, our Google Hangout session. We had an earlier one that took place in December, right after the Paris talk. So if you're interested in catching that, that is on our blog. We've held workshops on circular economy, as well as 2 showcases at 2 universities, George Washington and George Mason. And we continue to collaborate and partner with other organizations on events such as the United Nations Association and American Council for Renewable Energy. Okay, I'm going to move us towards our analyses, so I'm hoping that we can get a slide up pretty soon on that. Otherwise, I guess I'll just have to keep talking. although it would be nice to have the scenarios, because I think it would be easier if we do have anyone following us on the broadcast for them to be able to see that.
Just a second, Janine. Can you see the slides, Adrian?
I see again the first slide.
Okay, so these are the key things, and why are we discussing this? When we were preparing for our presentation, Adrian was really focused on a roadmap in terms of how we can move towards action, and I was struck because he had a number of these presentations, and he was sort of saying, hey, enough of these studies. So I thought it would be good for those who were not familiar with a lot of these studies to at least just put them on the table, so we all have kind of a framework for discussion, and then that'll help us as we move later on towards Adrian's discussion on a roadmap. So very quickly, in terms of these studies, there's a range. They range all the way from we can do it 100% renewable energy by 2050 using existing technology, not costing too much, all the way to others that say, wait, that's a little bit too expensive. There are other technologies where you can get a bigger bang for the buck. And then some, such as this Tracking Renewable Energy Progress, that says, wait, we're really not making as good progress as we need to make. So let's get started on each one of these. If you can move to the next slide, Sylvia. Basically, the nutshell of this report is that the International Energy Agency looked at 19 different technologies and sectors, and they say these do have the capacity to move the world closer to shared goals. But the downside was that the current pace of progress, they say, is falling short of their 2-degree scenario in terms of limiting climate change to a global temperature rise of 2 degrees centigrade. So they are cautionary in this report that not moving quite as fast as we need to. Okay, next slide. Next slide shows the various 19 sectors, and the one that I was looking at here is outlined in orange, renewable power. You can see that they have a very integrated approach. So for them to say that we're not moving ahead quickly enough on all of these, and if you can take a look at the next slide, which drills deeper into renewable energy, they're saying we're not even moving fast enough on renewable energy. This says renewable energy generation is expected to grow by 45% and between 2013, which is when they looked at the data, and 2020, but it's currently at risk at falling short of their larger goal. And I'm not as concerned about you knowing these numbers. They're big amounts. 7,537 terawatt hours is 1 trillion watt hours. But they're just talking about, really, in terms of trends, that the shortfall will increase even further by 2025, where they have a higher goal. Okay, next slide, please. This slide I thought was very interesting. Basically, it says solar PV is on track. They're looking at a total of 8 renewable energy technologies. They say hydropower needs improvement, but then if you look at all of the other renewable energy technologies, they're saying they're not on track. And again, feel free to go back and look at their report, but I thought it was kind of interesting in terms of sort of a snapshot of where they think we are going in current progress, just bringing that to your attention. Okay, the next study then, number 2, was, this is by the author Mark Jacobson, and he has done a number of reports on clean energy. Most recently was, well, the one he did on the 50 states, where he looks at 100% clean and renewable energy water and sunlight for all the states, and then after that he's looked at one for the world. That's still kind of in draft state, but I do have the draft up there, and they say they're working on it. Let's take a look at the next slide there. What is so interesting about his report, okay, he looks at how we can move to these renewable energy forms in each of the 50 states. He says this is an aggressive change in terms of requiring changes to infrastructure in ways we currently consume energy, but he thinks it's technically and economically possible through implementation of existing technology. So that's what I thought was so interesting, is he says we can do this now. And basically what he does is he ends up calculating how they would use coal, oil, gas, and nuclear, and then what the fuel demands would be if it were replaced with electricity. And he says when we did this across all 50 states, we saw a 39% reduction in total end-use power demand by 2050. So if you look at this aggregate chart here, you can see where he's basically reducing the demand in the gray by converting to electricity, increases in end-use efficiency, and then the rest of that is then being provided by renewable energy. So that's just kind of a big bird's eye view on what he does there. And the next slide, these are kind of interesting if you want to look at each one of the states. Sylvia, yeah, in the next slide, he does infographics for each one of the states, which is kind of neat because we're doing a event coming up here looking at the Washington, D.C. area, so it'll be good to look at both Virginia, Maryland, as well as D.C. projections. Okay, so why don't we move to the next one, which is Deep Carbonization Pathways Project. This was conceived by the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, which is a UN organization, and they did both a report that consolidates a number of studies that was done in 2014 and then this one 2015 for the United States. And again, those reports are available. They are hyperlinked, and we'll be getting this information out on our blog with this broadcast. Next slide, please. And their goal, they were going to create national working groups, and the goal is 80% non-fossil by year 2050. So it's interesting just to look at the different goals that these studies have. Okay, the next slide. Basically, their strategy is decarbonize the electric grid first, and that seems to be the way several of these studies are moving, and then switching to fossil fuel electricity for other applications, such as electrifying transportation sector and that sort of thing. Okay, next slide. So ultimately, they considered 4 possible pathways. Mixed technology as well as a high renewables case, and that's the one that I was focused on here. And the bottom line is on a high renewables pathway. They said it would require more capacity than in the other scenarios. So it can be done, just would require more capacity, so assuming that that would end up costing more, but it can be done. Okay, next one. This was the Bloomberg New Energy Finance Group, and this was less of a projection in terms of scenarios than just kind of looking at business as usual, sort of what's happening now. If you can get to the next slide on that, they have some projections in terms of what they're looking at vis-a-vis 2040. And the generating mix in terms of moving from 2/3 fossil to 56% with zero emission energy sources. That would include both nuclear and renewables. And they're saying renewables will command just under 60% of new generating capacity. So it was interesting because they did not include the EPA power plan in here because they said it hasn't been finalized yet. They don't include any other policy support. They kind of use carbon prices that are already out there or where they're thinking they've got some confidence in their immersion. So this was more of a business as usual, but even so, it did show that it will be moving more to renewables. Okay, next one. This is E-Revolution, a Greenpeace report. And the next slide on that, it's basically saying 100% energy, renewable energy is achievable by 2050. And basically they talk about phasing out fossil fuel in stages. I thought this was kind of interesting. First phasing out lignite, which they say is the most carbon intensive by 2035, and then they follow by coal in 2045, and then oil, and finally gas. And let's see, what were their estimates here? They were saying renewable share of electricity would triple from 21% to 64%. So interesting and a little bit higher than the Bloomberg report and a little bit earlier than the Bloomberg report because they're saying in the next 15 years, so that'd be 2030 or thereabout rather than 2040. They said the biggest challenge is heating and transportation, and they do recommend looking and more research in biofuels, hydrogen, and coming up with alternative fuels. Okay, next one. This was a study done by a University of Delaware professor in a Department of Computer and Electrical Engineering. And he basically looks at how to power the grid with renewables. He looks at by 2030 with wind, solar, and battery storage. Next one. And I guess this was one of the more interesting studies that I thought, because he really looks at a regional power grid here, and he ran something like 28,000 scenarios. I mean, it was really pretty incredible, the data that he was looking at, and some of his assumptions in terms of more of a real world project. And he suggests maybe starting with a 30% target now and then moving towards a 90% and then ultimately 99.9%. But it was interesting because he says with 2030 technology costs that we could use renewable energy in the grid at cost comparable to today. So I thought that was interesting. I'm surprised I haven't really seen a little bit more on this study on the internet. I put it up on a LinkedIn group, and I am curious if there are any other members that have any thoughts on this, and it might be nice to reach out to Corey as well. And I just realized it's Corey Budashek. I need to correct that typo on that slide. Okay, and then the next slide, and this was done by the Brookings Institution, and looked at net benefits of low and no carbon electricity. And I don't mean to leave on kind of a downer note for those in the audience who are more bullish on renewable energy, and I know that's what we were looking at. Next slide here. The author, Carl Frank, went through a bunch of different scenarios, and he looked at nuclear, hydro, natural gas, combined cycle, wind, and solar, and he ended up concluding that bang for the buck, that you would be able to reduce more carbon by spending that dollar on nuclear instead of renewables. But he did include all of these into his assumptions and everything, so I'm not ruling it out. I think he was just saying it might be more expensive. So at any rate, just presenting this information, getting it out there, so this will help set the foundation ultimately for what Adrian will be producing and discussing about on his roadmap. And then last slide, just if you're interested in more information on leaders in energy, have a website here, and our blog is where you'll ultimately be able to access this presentation. So without any further ado, thank you, and turn it over to Sylvia.
Thank you very much, Janine. Sorry for some technical issues. We'll try to correct the recording. So I am the least expert in energy from our team of three. It is not my core competency, so for more in-depth information, I point you to Janine and Adrian. But both as a citizen and as a sustainability consultant, of course, I have to be very interested in energy and the kind of energy that we will use in the next decades. So my presentation relates to the idea that we need to transition much faster than we are right now, with a goal of 2030 for a complete switch from our current architecture to renewable energy architecture. And just to ground everybody, we're using, or at least I am using, the EPA's definition for energy. There is a difference between green, clean, and renewable. So we're using EPA's, where green power is the one that has maximum environmental benefit. So what does that mean? Is that it is sourced from solar, wind, geothermal, biogas, eligible biomass, and low-impact small hydroelectric. So hydroelectric is renewable, but it can fall into less environmentally beneficial. Conventional power, which is what we're predominantly using today, includes the combustion of fossil fuels, so coal, natural gas, and oil, and also the nuclear fission of uranium. So while nuclear is emission-free at the power plant, it incurs a lot of damage upstream. So what are my thoughts on energy? One is that we need a fixed and stretched target year to achieve a complete transition of the global architecture from conventional to renewable energy. Right now, we see a lot of targets that Janine referred to. We also see sliding targets. And I think we're at the point where, again, we need to have a fixed stretch target and just do it. This is one instance when race to the bottom is very appealing, where I see the race to the bottom as being the end of the conventional energy age. We keep sliding the timeline on energy transition while bringing closer the point of no return in anthropogenic climate change, as we keep surpassing the wrong kind of records in Anthropocene. There are no significant technological barriers for this transition, so we don't need to wait for technological breakthroughs or major innovations. We have the technology in place. In my view, the barriers are rather politics and policies, in general, a short-termist attitude, scientific ignorance or denial, unaccounted cost. All the negative economic externalities are not incorporated in most of the businesses' performance measures. Wrong economic drivers, primarily the pursuit of growth, of constant growth, and our ethical and social values. I also think that the transition will happen rather through civic and local action rather than institutional and centralized. That doesn't mean that institutions are not important or political power is not important, but I think this is a case where everybody is in, and citizens and the way they organize will have a greater impact than legal or regulatory or international agreements. I think our group is an example of that. We found each other through our common interest in seeing a sustainable world, and one of the paths towards a sustainable world is through renewable energy. I also think that we are using a very old, very 18th century technology. Pretty much we're still boiling water to rotate a shaft at an overall loss of 60 to 70%. And it's really paradoxical that the internet that we're using right now is primarily supported by steam, if you think about it. So somehow we made a lot of progress with information technologies, but we're still hung up on very old power technologies. I also find it inelegant. So if you look at how a conventional power plant looks like, all kind of pipes and boilers and all kind of points of losses, compared to a wind farm, for instance, which is so easy to integrate in the natural or human habitat. I don't know why we wouldn't switch faster to the latter. Some of the records that we're breaking, and they're not looking at all good for our future, maybe not necessarily our future as a species, but definitely for our future as an advanced civilization. So I really take very seriously what climate scientists and other scientists say. And here is a quote from Dr. Erika Podest, as we surpassed 400 parts per million of CO2 in 2013. And what he's saying should give us all a call to action on energy. CO2 concentrations haven't been this high in millions of years. Even more alarming is the rate of increase in the last 5 decades, and the fact that CO2 stays in the atmosphere for hundreds or thousands of years. This milestone is a wake-up call that our actions in response to climate change need to match the persistent rise in CO2. Climate change is a threat to life on Earth, and we can no longer afford to be spectators. So what to do then? As Janine mentioned, the group at Stanford has created a very detailed and workable map for almost all countries for a switch to 100% clean and renewable energy by 2050. However, they started much earlier with the same roadmap for 2030, which is again the deadline that I am pleading for. So why did they have to redo it? I believe it's because we're not on track to achieve it by 2030, since nobody started implementing it seriously, with a few exceptions. Again, if you look at the people whose expertise is to look at energy, it is more than feasible to switch by 2030 to 100% renewable energy. And they give us the combination of renewable sources that we can use, which is hydro, tidal, wind, and solar. Now, there are things also happening at national, at governmental levels, which are positive. You see here a report by IRENA, the International Renewable Energy Agency, showing the growth in the number of countries that have renewable energy targets, and the trend is positive. Now, what we need to do is, again, not to slide this target or make them too inconsequential, like go for 30% transition to renewable energy by 2050, but make these targets practical and implement them. Another good thing also from IRENA reporting is that a lot of countries are going towards 100% in the by 2030, 2032, and a lot of them are really have legally binding requirements. So one here represents just a vision or a declaration of intent, and 4 represents legally binding regulations. Some of the regional or national initiatives are very, very encouraging. Africa, for instance, has presented at the COP21 their initiative called African Renewable Energy Initiative, which plans to produce 300 gigawatts of electricity by 2030. Again, this 2030 target comes into play. Another important thing to notice is that the project will help African countries leapfrog towards renewable energy. So there is an advantage for some places to be behind on the technological spectrum. Right now, there are many communities that have no electricity, no sources of energy, of advanced energy in Africa. So the good news is that they can leapfrog the conventional energy the same way they did with mobile phones. So nobody is installing landlines anymore in Africa. They're going for the most advanced technology. I myself find that very positive. and a lot of countries and communities should follow suit and not go through the same history of energy than some of the developed countries have. Another regional initiative at the European Union level, a combination of U4S, IREC, and Greenpeace is looking at the objective of 100% renewable energy in 2050. They're also tracking the performance and tracking the achievement of different commitments by countries in the so-called 2020 Keep on Track, which is achieving 20% renewable energy by 2020. And out of the 27 member states, some of them are expected to meet the targets, some are in doubt, and some of them will miss their targets, which is not a good thing. So that means that these countries have to accelerate their transition. United States, again, this is the nice roadmap that the people at Stanford have done, the team led by Mark Jacobson and Mark DeLucchi. Here is the portfolio, the mix of renewable energy that the United States can have if it were to use only 100% renewable energy. And it's a combination of small solar, commercial solar, large utility solar, so a lot of solar which fits well for our climate, and a lot of wind. There are also excellent projects happening in different countries and different communities. This is one excellent example that I like to present also as a so-called elegant solution. This is the view from space of the first stage of the Ouarzazate solar power plant in Morocco, which will have a final installed capacity of 500 megawatts. It really looks very beautiful to me, and also very nicely integrated in the landscape. Morocco is highly dependent on imports of energy sources and is going completely towards being independent and providing only clean energy for their use. So again, this is the first phase. The others are going to start soon. There will be three stages of this beautiful large-scale solar plant. I also like to quote small countries that are doing an excellent job in getting towards a full renewable energy portfolio. Again, in support of my argument that this transition will not happen necessarily at the very large levels, following the examples of big countries, but it will be one small country at a time, one community at a time. So here are a few examples that I like. Iceland is already at 100%. Of course, they have the natural resources for it. They're using hydro and geothermal, but other countries also have these resources, and they have not moved so aggressively like Iceland. Sri Lanka just announced a 100% renewable energy target for 2030 this month. Scotland is on track to be 100% renewable energy by 2030. Costa Rica has a 100% renewable electricity target of 2021. Fiji has a target of 2030. So I think these are the examples that we should be looking at in our communities and in our regions, see how they did it or doing it, and just follow their example. Also in support of my argument that this will be more of a bottom-up transformation is the fact that a lot of cities, not only in the United States, all over the world, are taking are deciding to convert their own municipal utility or their own city to renewable energy, not waiting for a national standard or a national transition. So from small cities like Georgetown in Texas to big cities like San Francisco in California, we have changes that are happening very fast. So Georgetown will be 100% renewable electricity, not overall energy, by 2017. Burlington, Vermont has already achieved that both by direct supply and also by contracting. And things can get even smaller where only a district decides to become 100% renewable. Malmö, Sweden has one of the best sustainability plans for a city in the world. But they started with a certain district. So Western Harbor is already at 100% locally provided renewable energy. So with that, I would like to ask Adrian to talk about roadmaps towards renewable energy.
Thank you so much, Sylvia. This was such a rich conversation already and rich presentations. Both Janine gave, of course, some, I mean, an overwhelming amount of background studies and information on the way we presently, you know, what we have studied, researched, and what's at the table for a roadmap towards 100% renewable, or say, massive amount for a transition towards a sustainable energy architecture, and you just shared actually all the basic backgrounds of what is required for the change, what sometimes is stopping the change, so the political, social elements, and you gave some very, very good examples of where it has already successfully.
Yes, I think it is, Adrian.
Okay, then I start again. So now, following these beautiful presentations from Janine and Sylvia on already giving us so much information, richness of information on the background of studies on the transformation from where we are today to a more renewable energy architecture or sustainable energy architecture, and also some signs of concern shared by Janine, that not all signs are healthy for the case which we want to make is an energy transfer in time. And Sylvia added a lot of good and overwhelming evidence of where energy transition is taking place, and also some of the issues which stops energy transition to actually to progress. Now, what I'd briefly like to do is some sharing of experience on the same of what it takes to organize for change. I just want to share also a little bit on the issue of why to change, so the reasons why a community, a nation, or an international relationship can decide for change, and what it may take us to change. So basically, how to organize it together, and how easy and how light is it, and in what time spirits can we think of. I brought a couple of slides with me. I've brought a handout with me, but the basic three things I want to say on the reason, the whys we want to change, and the timing of the change. And it's very simple. The first of all is, we all know, last year the United Nations embraced the 2030 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And they're relevant. They're relevant for our conversation because in two ways the United Nations said, if we want to have a peaceful, harmonic, good working global community where 9 billion people can share one planet, then we better get some metrics in order. And the metrics to do with, one, is that the social inequality, so living poor people next to very rich people, which generally speaking is not a happy ride in case it's in terms of conflict and in terms of living harmoniously next to each other. And the second, you know, if you looked at the large part of the goals had to do with the aggregate of our human development. And it's not only CO2, it's not only carbon emissions, but it's also about healthy cities, so that you can drink the water, you can breathe the air, so it's not polluted by smog, it's not polluted by car fumes. It has to do with waterways, it has to do with eco-footprint of the consumer behaviors, the transportation behaviors, and everything we have. So the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals were created, and they actually have measurement sticks till 2030 for us to meet. Now that's quite idealistic if you look at the state of the world we're in. And we only looked at Janine's state of the world, of how much fossil fuel print we have, and if you look at some of the handouts, how much eco-footprint we still have. So some of our countries around the planet still live on the basis of having 5 or requiring 3 or 5 planets in order to serve our present consumer behaviors if we don't change our industrial ways of getting these products to market. Now, the second reason why we want to change, and in a rather rapid way, is because of this CO2, this climate change dialogue and Paris Climate Change Agreement, which is a kind of a ticking clock. I mentioned it before, it's an emotional ticking clock. It's also a ticking clock because of the floods, the droughts, and everything, the storms, which can happen and can actually create human suffering and death away from your home, but in another one's country, and collectively may not look good at it. And it's a ticking clock because we've consumed already so much carbon emission in the atmosphere, and the atmosphere is a quite tiny layer on the global, on our planet, and it's actually getting charged over time, and the present rate of carbon emissions in the atmosphere is quite high. So if we keep doing it, in 15 years from now, we know that we are at the 2 degrees centigrade pathway, if not already on 3 degrees, 4 degrees. Now, scientists, they can look, they can sit behind their desk, but in essence, when they start to talk about 3 degrees, 4 degrees, or 5 degrees planets, generally speaking, the stories they come forward with to us are not so good. They are not so fun countries to live in, or they are not so fun a global village to live in. Really, things can become nasty. We better don't have that. So then the third element, if we want to look at scenarios and at the pathways forward, and that is actually the economic scenarios, how the people look from the Davos and the World Economic Forum and the G20 and the IMF, how they look at the present economic system, how they look at the way money flows today, how much trust there is in the market, how much confidence there is in the market, whether we are politicizing and militarizing, and so on. And basically, in the last 3 scenarios of Davos, which came out this year, it didn't look that rosy. Actually, the people came with quite scenarios which were more and more related with a competitive world, where nations, regions, or blocks try to create their own defensive mechanisms against the other. Now, why do I say that? If we want to change, and we want to change a global energy architecture, or a regional energy architecture, or a national energy architecture, it always has to do also with the way we feel about the global village, or the way we feel about doing trade and business with each other. The best conditions we can have is if we trust each other and we let innovation free to flow from China to India, from US to India, from US to Africa, from China to Africa, and we unlock these innovations which are positive, progressive, and building sustainable societies. But if we are in a competitive position, we may not do so. So they are also very relevant to context where we have to change. Now, fourth slide is a very simple slide. It comes from UNFCCC, from Christiana Figueras, and that shows us just how early in the game of change we are, and how much money, or it's not so much money, but we need approximately 16 trillion US dollars to spend on a global basis in order to change the global energy architecture. Maybe not fully, but for quite a substantial amount. And the 60, and we only, you know, and we heard it a little bit from Janine and Sylvia. Today we only have 600 gigawatts on, say, 15 terawatts or 20 terawatts on a global village. We only have produced 600 gigawatts from wind, solar, and hydro. We are producing every year 60 gigawatts on solar and wind on this moment, and our world global energy system is 50 trillion watts or 20 trillion watts, and it's growing as well. So we really have a rat race to do, is whilst we are growing our energy architecture around the globe, more people consuming, more people getting wealthy, a new rise of middle class, we have to run very fast with building up capacities in the renewable energy sector, if at all we want to achieve any of the three goals I just mentioned. So, and if we proceed then we come to the studies which Janine showed, and I don't have all these studies here, but basically there is some evidence and there is some supportive research and evidence that transition can be done. It can be done in the electricity grid. There is some ways of transition in the industry and agricultural communities, in the heat and cooling systems. And there is, of course, already some early proof as well that we can transit something of the private mobility into electric mobility or more commuting rail systems and so on. So we know certain systems which have been proven, they exist, but they're not on the scale as we like to have them. Now, and then a brief reality of today. We also have energy outlooks, so where people look at the future of oil, gas, coal, and renewables. And it's true that the incumbents, so you see here some of the incumbents sitting in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia, if they look at the world of oil and gas, they just say, well, oil and gas is now 85, or you know, and with coal is 85% of the global community. We all agree that coal's maybe a fuel of the past. But oil and gas, so these gentlemen of oil and gas, they're quite confident that the demand for their product, and that's something which they see from the buying forces around the table, that the demand for their product is still very, very strong in the east, in the south, and where they are. So they see a growth market actually on oil and gas, and that matters. So you see also at the right, you see some views on energy and sustainability, and it was last year. It matters because Pope Francis and Mr. Jeffrey Sachs of the UN, they made a little bit of a warning, and they said to these gentlemen of fortune, this may not be the best mindsets, but we need today from the incumbents, from the people who are sitting and owning and being the steward of oil and gas and coal. Maybe we need them, and we definitely need them also on our board to help the transition, because it has to do with their economies, but it has also to do with the amount of competitive power. And I don't think we yet have these right conversations. So we need these better conversations with these gentlemen in order to do what Janine and Sylvia all pledged for, and in order to accomplish certain global goals which we all feel we are all part of. So the global goal of building sustainable societies, the global goal of not harming environment, so the climate change dialogue, and the global goal that if we just keep pumping up oil and gas, we may find ourselves in problem. Now, then I come to a slide which I hold dear, is that when I talk about energy transition, so change of the present to the future, I take into that change a holistic view on the way a present system works, a present organizational constellation work. So it's not only the hardwire stuff we look at, and we should be very interested in on having a visionary and a blueprint for the hardwired stuff, so where we can all buy into, but we should also look at the stakeholders in the community, the people's interest, the financial interest, the legal structures, the political lobby, and all these elements which are actually around the table in order to change, to make the change to happen, or actually to block the change, what we see in a lot of environments as well. So in essence, my practice and our practice, Leaders of Energy Without Borders, our goal is, of course, is to communicate with all these people and to make sure that they can see a buy-in, that they can come to the table and that they can help in order to make the transition to work. Now, in another slide, you see a little bit the different components of an energy architecture, of the different players, the stakeholders in an energy architecture. It goes from governance to business players to sustainability considerations, the legal frameworks, and so on. So if, in essence, this is the jigsaw puzzle, if all these elements work together and are for everything Sylvia and Janine has said, then you will see rapid change. If all these elements are not together, and you will see some on green and some on red and some on orange, then we know we have work to do, because there will be friction in the change. There will be resistance in the change, or the change will not be full-hearted. And in another slide, you see something which has been studied by some people from the UN or PhDs of the UN, and they say basically how they look at it. They say if you want to integrate the goals of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, the achievement of getting climate change in order, not only in your nation but also for other people, and you want to do an energy architecture change, you need something which they call a magic word, integrated transition governance. So you need actually to look at the present organizations, you look at your ministries, you look at your utility companies, you look at your legal frame structures, you look at the financial institutes paying the projects and the investments, you look at the shareholder community, you look at the civil society, and somehow you have to manage that lot. And that is the job we are in. Now, if you want to put it in a picture, you know it. I mean, it's easy. It's known by us all. It's a picture of you know, the U.S. Congress or a House of Representatives. It's a picture of global boardrooms or boardrooms of our incumbent institutes, which are the power horses of our today. It's the people on the streets and the local communities who want to change or not change. It's conferences where people gather and speak about all the things we're speaking on right now. And in the middle is a kind of an entrepreneur, Mr. Bill Gates, who also has an initiative which is called Energy Breakthrough Coalition and Mission Innovation. But there are all the entrepreneurs who want to help to change. Now, the reality today still is, and I hope you're with me, that the amount of capital-intense change in the energy system so far is still on the early phase. So we truly need the bigger workhorses and the bigger systems to work with us. You see a gentleman of OPEC and so on, and it would be beautiful on the moment that OPEC start to say, yes, we see room for electric mobility, and yes, we see room that it makes sense in the highly dense urban cities of our planet, that we don't have all these car fumes and that we want our product oil to be used for more industrial applications and for the heavy transportation applications. So that's the type of conversations we need to have in our societies, in the profession, and with really the leaders of our sector, of the energy sector, on location and in a national scale. Now, if you go into one more slide, I give a little bit of a flavor of how these better dialogues and conversations on reinventing strategies can work. It's truly bringing balance to the table. It's not any longer a polarization game of you are wrong and I'm right. I'm for the economy, you're for sustainability. I live for society. I think about governance. That's not the game we're in. The true game we're in is to be inviting, to get these people to the table and to build with these people the better blueprints for the transition. And that's finding truly the new value drivers for why we want to have and where we can spend our, you know, what Janine mentioned, the best money for a buck, or get the best bang for our money for a buck, where to do that in our national energy architecture. And of course, learning from all these great good examples from Iceland and Fiji and California and Virginia and everywhere else. So we're no longer living on an island. we can truly connect the different practitioners, the different professionals, and the different innovations in every part of the energy value chain right now as we speak. And we don't have to wait for new technologies, as was correctly mentioned. Now, wherever I go and I listen to conversations, I hear very often the level of maturity of where people are in their thinking on what type of change they want to embrace. And I show you here 4 levels. It's just a simple model by me. You see it actually coming more and more also in the literature. But basically a level 1 change and a level 2 change is a change where the renewables and the green technologies are being used in a reasonable way, but just in a copycat actually of what the fossil fuels were. And that was so we don't change the company structures, we don't change ownership structures. We still basically remain with the established incumbents, but they just take another role. The level 3 and 4 are going a little bit deeper, and more people see that if we truly want to embrace the sustainable societies and we truly want to embrace climate change for real, that we want to do no harm to ourselves and to others, so we don't want human suffering in an unnecessary way, then there's truly a deeper form of eco-consciousness and a deeper form of social consciousness is required. So if we don't want to fight each other. And in another way of level of maturity of change, what you can hear and listen around the globe, is in the different sectors or the segments of the energy value chain. So the electricity market, so sometimes people say, oh, we will have a 100% renewable energy system by 2030. Generally speaking, the people are then talking about the electricity market. And it's true that we can, by wind, solar, pumped hydro and storage and a little bit of gas here and there and a better grid, we can come to a 100% renewable energy system because it's already proven, people know it already, and we can build it today. In the transportation and industry, we are actually truly still standing at the early phases of transition. You only have to think about Obama's Plan Obama for the transportation sector. You just have to listen to the reactions in the US on that plan, and you know that the actual conversations on how to create the better pathways around cities and between our work and life and how we move around and how we ship and truck around, it just only have started today or these days. And in the industry where Sylvia is working, circular economy, green chemistry, 3D printing, light materials, different ways of building our homes and the materials, it's also starting. It has started, but it's still in an early phase. Now, to wrap it a little bit up, is that I like to go to slide 19, and it's a slide where we see the different regions having some different forms and maturity in their dialogues and conversations on transition. Scandinavia was mentioned in this conversation. Stockholm was mentioned. I've got a slide from Växjö and and Norway, Denmark. They're all a little bit known by their advancement in their energy transition, not only for climate change, but also on an eco-conscious level. So also a little bit a deeper level of looking at their city structures, looking at the ways they produce and manufacture, and going for a little bit of a deeper way of energy architecture and eco-consciousness. In Northwest Europe, you have Germany as a leader in the way of how they approach the energy Wende, by truly having many of these stakeholders around the table, so between governments, business, and society, and they've started the transition of their utility, of their electricity grid, and they're still arguing a little bit of whether they have to transit the BMWs and the Mercedes-Benz. because they run so good on fuel still. In Africa, which was mentioned before, and I really liked listening to that Africa is often mentioned as the continent of where a quantum leap can take place. It is also still very much true that the incumbents of oil, gas and coal are still very much present in Africa, and many ministries in Africa and many countries in Africa are still promised lots of money because of the resources in the ground and not the resources in the atmosphere. So many of these energy transition pathways for Africa are really not yet started. It's just the renewables are an add-on. They're also done in a great way, but Africa is also rapidly building its infrastructure of fossil fuel-based economies. That's true for India and Southeast Asia, by the way, as well. So these people, the mental mindset in many of the countries around the globe is still that you need fossil fuel horsepower in order to build your industries, in order to build your infrastructure, in order to have your 100% electricity, and because of the speed in which they believe they can get things to work. So it's easier to open a coal mine and a coal factory, apparently, than to install skilled wind power and solar in a great way. And that is sad. That is sad in a way, because if we go to slide number 22, with Americans' New Grid, because this study is quite relevant and it's quite true and it's quite honest. It is true that there are so many evidence now that if you connect over a continent high voltage grid structure and you unlock wind, solar, hydro and so on in a great way, as we can do today, the actual need for fossil fuels in your electricity system is close to nil. So in essence, we are still also part in exporting fossil fuel-based centralized power grids to markets. So, and that is, if we want to change certain ways, one, we have to change our own ways in our own countries or in our own district, in our own state. But another thing we have to change, if we want to change and we want to achieve these milestones of 2030 or 2050, we have to change how we do international trade. We have to change how we help to build nations to get a good economy. So we have to truly get the best and the brightest to the table, also from the fossil fuel industry, and talk with them and get them to appreciate and work with us to build better countries in Africa, build better countries in the Far East, build better countries in India, build better countries in Argentina, together with those people, of course, and create these exchanges, create these bridges of getting the best studies to the table, the best blueprints to the table, and the best investments to the table. And that is a little bit true in slide number 23. When you go and look at cars and car manufacturing around the globe, it is also true that in many countries around the globe, people and administrations and business community are still also opening up ICE fueled cars and printing them. So there's a lot of capacity building and actually a belief in the energy system, energy society, that we're going from 1 billion private cars to 2 billion private cars owned by people. Now there's one thing what can change that, and can change that for the better, because one thing is we can't see all these 2 billion cars driving happily in cities of New Delhi, Mexico City and around without making people very unhealthy. Car fumes do kill. The other thing is that actually this marriage of a Google with an Uber, and it doesn't have to be these two companies, but a self-driving car on demand has actually the potential of completely transforming the way we think about road architecture, road infrastructure, car parking, the need of having a car, etc., in dense populated areas. And this is truly game-changing. Now, it doesn't come out of Google. Google will not, make it to work around the globe. It truly needs, again, energy professionals, leaders in energy, people from governments, people in the business community to stand up, to sit down together and say, let's make one of those plans to work. And let's invest in the future, let's build these futures, and let's build the capacity and the capabilities for this future. So, and that's the transformation in the automotive industry. You see some resistance at the established car manufacturers. They see, of course, that if we do that, it changed the business model. It changed the business model from selling volumes to a business model of selling a service and selling mobility to the many. So that change of mindset and that change of willingness to invest in that and to create that, I think that's such an exciting time to be in. Now, I'd like to go 24-25. It is the truth as well, is that much of the 100% renewable societies today come from the small. So it is done in small communities where people stand together, come together and say, yes, we want to contribute. Yes, we feel better when our surrounding is more natural. And yes, we want to invest in this 100% renewable or 100% electricity system around our homes. And it's, well, here you see an organization who's tracking all these 100% renewable communities. You see it in Sweden, mentioned by Sylvia before, but where we can truly learn from how to get to the greenest city. I'd like to go to slide 27 and finish off. There are 197 countries need to change, and that's a big world out there. So we came together in Paris to agree on a certain pathway for 2020, 2025. We came in New York to agree on building sustainable societies for each other. I cannot see any better mission, sense of meaning, purpose for energy professionals to look a little bit different at the market as we did yesterday. Yesterday I was a utility company and I was operating in my own state or in my own city, and I was responsible for my own city, and that was it. If I were in a utility chair today, I would look at this map of 197 countries, and I would recognize there are so many professionals out there, so many assets out there, so many operating procedures out there, so many new installations out there which needs our attention and which needs our better project management, business development, operational management, and so on. Wow, what a wonderful world I live in utility, in a utility community. I can become a global service provider to so many utility companies right now. My business model can change, my service model can change. I can truly educate professionals and innovate professionals to deliver these better energy infrastructure. The same is true, of course, if you're a refinery holder, you're a manager of refineries of an oil and gas company, and you have a little bit of stewardship in you, and you care about planet Earth, and you care about the health of the people in your nation. You say, wow, 197 countries need mobility. They need trucks, they need cars, they need ships. Wow. How can I create and innovate with all these good technology providers and these entrepreneurs and these people who have come with better solutions? How can I unlock that, and how can I innovate it and bring it to scale and bring it to market and bring it to economy in a great way? And that's actually where we are. That's where we are, this leadership of energy without borders. It's truly built. It's not saying farewell to things, but it's walking hand in hand together and building better bridges between nations, between these different energy sectors, elements, between solutions, and to create this mission and this vision of, yes, the energy system, the energy architects of this planet, they can become the true steward of building sustainable societies. Yes, we can. I mean, I've heard it, shouldn't say it. And part of that is that you have to manage circles of change. So you have to look at, it's not only a technology, it's not a technology game, it's truly also a game of understanding cultures, about people feelings, about building people, so making leaders bigger and making companies bigger, making the cake bigger for people, how to make more economy for people, so that we truly look from it with grace in this transition. So we don't argue too much, but we really are builders of grace between the people and between the solutions. And that's truly an element of a little bit of a learning in leadership. So from the established, effective, efficient, and corporate nuts and bolts of managing your own shop, to a little bit also inclusive management, and inclusive management of looking at the wider issue and the wider meaning of what the contribution of your company can be to society and to all the things we just mentioned in this whole conversation. And that's where I guess we want to have you. We want you to walk on that path with us and help us to organize these type of solution space for people. I thank you for that. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much, Adrian.
Yeah.
If there are still other participants on the call, we would like to invite you to send us your questions or comments. We will stay maybe 10 more minutes in the broadcast. We apologize again for the mishaps, but that's how it is with technology. If you don't have time to post questions or comments right now, we will post the video on YouTube, and you can send your comments there. But we will stay again a few more minutes to wait for your questions and comments. I would like to thank again Janine and Adrian for the dialogue that we're constantly having, not only during this session. It helps us sharpen our arguments, find the best solutions in this diverse group that we have, our mini group and the larger groups, the leaders in energy. In the end, as Adrian said, we should all be pursuing positive goals for the planet. So car manufacturers should see themselves as mobility providers, not necessarily a certain type of car. And energy providers, even more so, should see themselves as such, energy providers, and not be tied to a certain form of energy. And the older it is, the more boring it should be for them to stick to it. What we all want is a world that is sustainable, that is fair, that is shared with pleasure and well-being by absolutely every human being that lives today, that will live in the future, in the very long future, and not only the human species, but all the species in the world. And again, technically we can do that. What we need to change is our mindset, and maybe the speed by which we change in certain sectors. And we have examples of sectors that are moving very fast, like computer technology, which, by the way, will help the transition to renewable energy, as Adrian mentioned, through the smart grid. So why not follow their example instead of trying to extract the maximum out of an old technology? So we invite a larger audience to our future broadcast. We invite you to our Leaders in Energy groups conversations, where we're still having debates about certain forms of energy. Not everybody agrees with a certain mix for many reasons, but this is where we need to have a dialogue and then get on to applying those solutions. Janine, are you still with us?
I sure am. Adrian, what a beautiful presentation, and just enjoying all your slides with the circles and the bridges, and very positive outlook on, the world is out there, 197 countries, and just the wonderful potential, just very, very exciting on a positive note, but also sobering a little bit when you talk about winners and losers and, the new technology ideas, but then, the existing companies, and, it reminds me of coal miners and, who's going to help them as they transition, and then just the hurdles that you mentioned. What was it, $60 trillion of investment? I think I've seen 50 trillion before from International Energy Agency. That was like a year or so ago. So it does get rather daunting, and I know you and I shared some information before this call just on our budget here in the United States for our energy investment, and how it is so much lower in efficiency and renewable than some of the other sectors. So yeah, it does all very much food for thought, but I can't say how much I've enjoyed this session. And as Sylvia aptly pointed out, really it sort of forces us to kind of sharpen and hone our respective skills. And Adrian, thank you so much for pointing out some of those studies that really got me looking kind of under the hood. And then I found even some more studies. So just very interesting to look at all these analyses. And, I think you need to look at the analyses to kind of examine various projections and sort of risk analysis, the best way to move us forward. So thank you for bringing that to our attention, and just delightful to continue to collaborate, and hopefully in the future we'll get some of these technical bugs worked out, and maybe also find a way for our leaders to actually converse with us as well in terms of the technology and everything. I know we had a couple people that were following us for a while. I don't know if they made it all the way to the end, but I look forward to catching up with them and getting some of their observations.
Yeah, fully agreed. And it's you already showed some form of dashboard of where we are with the different progress and trends on the different technologies. But it's truly about you need some form of dashboard of how are we in the change on the energy systems around the globe. And that's, of course, part of the United Nations work. It's the 17 goals are being monitored. So in essence, out of that, we could distill a small dashboard for what you can see.
Adrian, somehow you're garbled. I'm not sure what's happening. If you changed anything on your microphone.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
Oh, much better now. Yeah. Can you start at the beginning?
Yeah. No, it's about the dashboard for the change. So the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, they have all kinds of metrics beyond them, and in that is a kind of metrics also for the change on the energy system. So we can start to at a certain moment, if people want to know where they are, you can start to look at these metrics.
And you said the United Nations is doing this?
Yeah, the United Nations is doing that. Yeah.
And it was part of the goals, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Yeah. Very, very interesting. And perhaps you may know that we're doing an event with United Nations Association this coming Thursday on DC to, Paris to DC, acting on affordable clean energy. So we're going to pick up on some of this conversation there.
Yeah, I think it's very useful for you, and it's very useful in the intent of the effort. It's beautiful if you can make a good connection there and choose your group in Washington. I think it's beautiful because it's all part of what I think the job which we have at hand. It's quite a big road ahead of us.
I guess back to you, Sylvia, if you have any other thoughts or comments. I know you have a hard stop at 3, so whatever you suggest for proceeding.
Again, if our audience wasn't able to ask questions during this session, please contact us through the Leaders in Energy group on LinkedIn or directly through our emails. Also, post comments on the YouTube video. We thank you very much for staying with us, for your patience, for your interest in this topic. And please watch for our next session. Probably we'll schedule it sometime at the end of March. As we were talking about job displacement, which is one of the reasons why things are not moving faster, maybe we can talk about that and present to people what are all of the good job substitutions that can take place, so people are not don't feel threatened by this transition. I think the coal miners in West Virginia would rather stay on the top of a windmill that in the ground with all the danger that implies, and be able to keep their beautiful landscape in the meantime. So thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to be with you again, Janine and Adrian.
Likewise. Thank you, Sylvia.
And we'll see each other online and in our future session.
Very, very nice.
Sylvia, when do you think this will be available? We'll work on this pretty soon to get it up on our blog.
Yeah. So I will stop the broadcast now.
Yeah.
Very good.
Enjoy the
Have a nice day.
Okay. Bye. Bye.